Precious Prodigy Peter Parker by concreteflour. Chapter 6. Pepper and Tony. Tony Stark was a man of impulse. Some of his best ideas came when he was exhausted, trapped, wounded, or otherwise outside of what a normal person would call routine. Only a few people had ever seen this side of him, since he rarely let people get that close. Oh, he was famous for his dalliances, but most of those people never even woke up with Tony still in the same building, and sometimes he was in a different country by then. Only 3 people, well, now 4 with Peter, ever saw that side of Tony. They were Pepper, Rhodey, and Happy. Even Peter hadn't seen the terrible swings that Tony had gone through, mostly because of alcohol. He had cut way back once Peter had been around. Tony thought he was in a good place. No terrible news reporting on him or the Avengers. No disasters or calamities in the recent past. Lab time was both relaxing and productive, as Peter was actually becoming a resource to bounce ideas off of. Life was looking up. The door to the lab slammed open. "Tony, what the hell do you think you're doing?" yelled Pepper. Reattaching the subharmonic relay in my left gauntlet," answered Tony. "Not that," said an obviously exasperated Pepper. "I want to know what you're doing with Peter Parker." "Pete? What's wrong with Pete?" Pepper dropped several folders, each several inches thick, on Tony's lab table. "For your information, and known to almost everyone but you and I, Peter probably has more projects going on at SI right now than you do, in more areas of research with even more staff, and is probably involved in almost 70%, she enunciated that part very slowly, of the research going on in this building at this time." "You're kidding. He's my intern. He helps out in the lab with me. No one else even knows he's here." "Not even close." Pepper actually grimaced at Tony. "It seems that he's a local favourite. Your Nobel laureates compete for his services. There is hardly anyone in any lab other than this one that doesn't beg for him to come collaborate with them." Tony shook his head. "No, see, that's impossible. The kid only works here with me." "Friday, please display the graph of the hours Peter spends here in Tony's lab versus other parts of R&D. A holographic image in a pie chart, along with associated raw data, showed up in front of Tony and Pepper. The chart obviously showed a smaller slice of the pie was being allocated to Tony in his lab. Tony actually spluttered. No, that can't be right. Some of those dates I wasn't even here. Fry, how could Peter have been here if I wasn't here?" Friday responded. "Mr. Parker was given full access by you to all the labs, sir. When you are not here, and if he is following safety protocols, he is allowed to work on any project." Tony was rapidly shifting through the stacks of lab reports. No, this can't be right. There are projects all over the board. Electronics, engineering, chemistry, biochemistry, physics. No, the kid helps me out here with his suit, and sometimes with the Avengers gear. This can't be right." Tony was shaking his head. "Bruce and I found a bunch of projects that he's working on, but these are completely different from those. You're talking literally hundreds of different research projects. There's no way. I can't even keep up with every single project that everyone is working on, let alone contribute." "Oh, it is. I've talked to all of the lab directors involved. I've threatened most of them with firings. They have all taken advantage of a teenager. But to a person, they all admit that they would do it again. They have all learned how smart Peter is, and they would move heaven and earth to utilise his brain. I think you need to review his work, talk to the lab directors, and figure out just how smart Peter is. And you'd better do it quick. His school was in today, and that's how we found all this out. It seems your high school intern is regularly doing graduate and postgraduate level work over several disciplines. We are going to meet with them tomorrow to discuss Peter's future. I suggest you get up to speed." With that, Pepper turned and left, leaving the paperwork in front of a stunned Tony Stark. Tony stared at the quickly receding back of his on-again, off-again fiancée and he stared at the pile of papers in front of him. Slowly he slumped into a chair. "Fry, see if Bruce is available to come down here." When Bruce entered the lab 15 minutes later, he saw no less than 50 large holographic screens up and running. A quick glance at what was on them gave no clue as to what project Tony needed his help with. Chemistry equations were on the first screen, and engineering the second. Others had references to projects Bruce knew were being developed downstairs. He turned to Tony, who was comparing notes on paper, something he never did, to the notes on the screens. "Hey, Tony, what's up?" "Bruce, thank God, I need your help," Tony said, exasperated. "With what project? It looks like you're working on dozens," Bruce replied. "With all of them. They're not my projects, they're Peter's projects. Or projects he's involved in, or collaborating with Nobel laureates or other PhDs. You know how we were talking the other day about how smart Peter is and how we should test him?" "Yeah, I remember. I'm starting to think there might not be a test hard enough to test him. Most of the stuff here in my field is great and advanced, but there are more fields here that I have to acknowledge are beyond me, and he's only in high school." "I can see that. These biochem equations are graduate-level derivations. You're saying this is all his work? How is this possible?" "It seems my lack of oversight was filled in by unscrupulous lab directors that were eager to tap his brain. Once they realised how smart he was, which the fact that I was so slow leaves me kicking myself figuratively, and Pepper is doing literally, they have been introducing him to all aspects of what SI is working on," Tony said with a sigh. "But he's a teenager in high school. How would they expect him to... No, that's too incredible." "Incredible, yes. Impossible, no. I've talked to one of the lab directors who told me the same thing that I already know. Everyone, and I mean everyone, loves Peter. He personally stated that Peter has saved them months in product development and probably millions of dollars in cost and time." "Okay, I can see that, but what do you need me for?" "Peter's school is coming tomorrow and I have to explain all this," Tony said with a sweeping gesture around the room. "I have to have a plan for his education and what we're going to do to help. Buddy, I need your help. I'm going beyond my comfort zone. We need to think of something." Tony settled back into the chair with a slightly wild look of utter desperation, yet with utter determination. The two scientists/friends/Avengers got to work. 8 o'clock the next morning found Tony and Pepper inside the apartment of Peter and May Parker. Peter was, fortunately, at school at that time. They were there to explain the recent events and invite May to a meeting later that day with the school staff and other interested parties. May started out understanding that her nephew was smart and probably a genius. When Tony was trying to explain that Peter was probably just as smart as himself in engineering, and as smart as Bruce Banner in biochem, and smarter than a whole roomfuls of PhD graduates, May took on a look of incredulity. Pepper had to step in and say, yes, Peter was in fact working with distinguished doctors in several fields, and had impressed, even astounded them all. Pepper, who actually had better rapport with May, lay out the groundwork of what they wanted to do. At 4 p.m. that same day, Tony and Pepper once again welcomed Mrs. Williams and Principal Moriter into SI. This time, the conference room they were led to was fuller. Both school people were acquainted with May Parker, who was sitting at one end of the table. The introductions around the table was like a veritable who's who from the science world. Dr. Bruce Banner, Dr. Thomas Boyer from MIT, Dr. Stephen Tanksley from Harvard, and 4 more doctors from SI, all with names that were recognisable. The professors from MIT and Harvard showed how much clout the name Tony Stark carried. Everyone by this time had been made aware of the enormous volume of work that Peter had been performing, all of it well past a normal high school student. Bruce and Tony had previously laid out, along with the lab directors, exactly what Peter had been working on to the professors from the universities. This included video that Friday had collated of Peter collaborating with lab scientists. This covered a good part of the morning. The work itself was in normal enough cases to award an advanced degree in one or more fields. More than once in history, people have received degrees for advanced work in a field of study. The more that was described, the more interested everyone had gotten. This was almost humorously shown by the fact that MIT and Harvard were actually competing to see who would offer the best education package to Peter. May, and surprisingly Tony, were adamant that Peter finish his high school and be a normal kid for as long as possible. None of the people besides Pepper, Tony, Bruce and May were aware just exactly how unnormal Peter was. Starting immediately, with Peter's approval, would be a multi-pronged educational programme designed to catch up on anything skipped over in Peter's education and to accelerate his education in others. By the time Peter graduated high school, he would earn at least a bachelor's in engineering and chemistry from MIT and a bachelor's in business from Harvard. Everyone involved agreed to NDAs for the safety of a minor, as well as any potential danger if anyone found out everything that Peter was involved in. Mrs. Williams and Principal Moritor walked away from SI with a sense of awe. "It was only yesterday that we brought this to the attention of Pepper Potts," Mrs. Williams said as they shared a taxi back to Midtown. 24 hours in her hands or Tony Stark's is not the same as other people, I believe. Besides, did you see any rings under Tony's eyes? He couldn't have gotten any sleep and looked like that. Dr. Banner's eyes were just as ringed. Miss Potts looked fine, however," replied Principal Moritor. "Ha!" laughed Mrs. Williams. "There is a woman that could probably spend a week straight up working and still look like she came out of a spa." "So, do you feel better about your student now?" asked the principal. "Well, he's not really my student anymore. His class time will be filled with coursework from 2 universities instead of high school chemistry. But I feel better about him being challenged. If anything truly could challenge the boy. I just feel lucky to be able to see and know him before he changes the world, which I firmly believe he will." Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this chapter. Have a lovely day.